Owen, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, mate.
So, most people when they leave university, they will typically go and work in Tesco's, stacking shelves, or doing something along those lines while they figure out what it is they want to do. You, however, went straight into building a tech startup. Did you always know that you wanted to be in business?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it is worth giving a bit of backstory then. It's quite funny because I always tell a story of like how I think my dad was probably quite happy to see me go to uni because I was always couldn't sleep at night, coming downstairs while he's having his evening at half 10, 11, me like, new idea, new idea. And it was like good fun, but it was always like, that's already been done. Here are the reasons. Like it really helped like critical thinking. But the plan was never to like go into business. I always had this view of like going into study medicine and maybe go down to like be a surgeon or doctor, which is like, yeah, all my, I guess, subject choices and learnings were for that medical route. And then it was like 16, 17, where I started getting really interested in like business, finance, investing, which quickly made that transition of like, let's not spend 5 years studying medicine. Like, this is really exciting. I'm really enjoying this. Let's go and study economics with the idea of going down like finance, investing, like investment banking, etc. So the truth is, no, the plan wasn't to go into business. And then very quickly, whilst at university, it was like, yeah, this stuff's expensive to have fun, like need to try and make some money. So I was doing like lots of fun little side hustles, like some e-com stuff, Amazon FBA, matched betting, doing some trading stuff on the side. Some made like good money, some failed miraculously, but none were like long-term business plays. And then, yeah, it was kind of not a last minute decision, but like a placement year of actually, could business be the thing that we really give a good shot? From some problems that I faced directly at uni. And yeah, it kind of just led me down that path. So
Love that. What was that? I guess that moment, that tipping point for you where you did fully commit to the decision of leaving medicine and leaving everything else behind and really going in on like business, not necessarily Roomy at that point in time, and we'll come on to what Roomy is and how it's developed into what it is now for the listeners in a minute. But was there a major tipping point for you where you were like, this is it?
I guess the decision from medicine to economics, it never really felt like a decision. It, weirdly enough, now looking back, it kind of felt very natural. It was just like, oh, loads of interest here. And I've always been very fortunate that my parents have been really supportive of whatever I kind of want to do. A little bit more tricky around like the school and academic front. I think it's probably preferred to have gone down a medical based route. But in general, it was kind of like, no, this is kind of what I want to do now. They had no real kind of decision to it. And then it was just straight into it. In terms of going into business, it's kind of a bit back to front because I'm not sure I would have made the decision to go into business if it wasn't for the idea of Rumi.
Mm,
So I'm not sure if you want me to kind of give a bit of context around that.
please do.
Now, so yeah, I guess to kind of highlight what Rumi is today, we are a tech platform and mobile application for students to find the right housemates, the right accommodation, and make that move-in period really seamless, with the goal of going on to be more of like a community and connectivity platform for bringing students today kind of back together to create an environment and the student experience that I believe that 16, 70-year-olds think that they'll get, which sadly is kind of the opposite. I mean, it's a really scary stat. It's like 52% of students leave university with mental health problems. That's quite scary. It's like you got a 1 in 2 chance of like having mental health issues at uni. And that's largely driven now by like the very digital world we're in, of like the real lack of like in-person connection, right? You can do your lectures online, you can order Deliveroo to your bedroom. There's no real need to like go out and socialize like there was previously. So that like connection and experience is really lacking. But I guess in terms of like why Rumi, why it came about and like why I made the decision, it's come a long way since like what the idea initially was. But I think I made the joke earlier around, yeah, keep annoying dad with new ideas. Uh, Sadly for him, it didn't stop at uni because I gave him a call probably 3 to 4 months into uni when I was doing some of the other side projects, and said having a nightmare finding like a really good group of like housemates and then like good accommodation for year 2. And I was like, the system just seems so just like outdated and fragmented. Like it's just not easy. Like we're in a digital world now. Like why is there not a really seamless solution? I think this is a real problem, and the bare bones of a solution I described, it was kind of the first time where dad kind of went, like, I think you're like onto something here. This sounds like it's worth kind of really looking into, which was kind of quite eye opening. And it kind of started from there, which is then how my co-founder James, that we went to school together from 11, he'd gone to a different university, facing very similar problems. And then we started kind of fleshing out the ideas of how we can solve it very early. And then it was kind of placement year. So just to explain, there's quite a lot of university courses now that are 4 years instead of 3 years, with the idea, like you said, it's so hard to get a job post uni now. Your third year, you do a year in placement, with the idea that you get a year's experience and you're more likely then to get a graduate role after. For me, I was like, as you probably know, investment banking pays well. Like you can make pretty good money. And my fear was, I think we're sat on a great opportunity with Rumi. If I go down the investment banking route and get kind of that level of security, it becomes very hard to leave, because as your life goes, it's like, then you get married, then you have kids, and to take the risks become harder. So it was like, well, the opportunity's here now. Let's give it a good shot. It was really challenging to get that passed with the uni, to kind of do the business rather than get a proper placement as my third year. But James and I were kind of so bought in that it was very natural. It kind of didn't even seem like a choice. It was just like, yeah, like we're doing Roomy now. Like after university, like we're not getting jobs. Like we're just all in. A very long-winded way of explaining, I guess, how we got to that.
I love it. I love it. And I remember seeing something on I think it was on your LinkedIn that said that most students nowadays are actually kind of worried less so about the grades they're going to get as a result of uni, but they're more anxious about the housing situation and the ability to get housing and who they get paired with and things like that. Now, as someone that's not gone to uni, I can imagine that one of the reasons that you're aware of that is because that's probably a pattern that you picked up on through your own experience as well. One thing that I recognize with a lot of the people that I speak to, yourself being one of them who is an ADHD entrepreneur, is our ability to be able to like pattern recognize and pattern match. Was that something that has lent into your favor and as a bit of a benefit for you through this journey of building Rumi?
You're right to a lot of the things. I think, like you said, the ADHD entrepreneur, I know I'll probably come onto it, but I was also recently diagnosed with autism. So that kind of, there are so many fantastic benefits, which I know we'll get onto, and there are so many things that I think I've found struggling and challenging, like probably many other people like in our shoes. And one of them in business that I think is a great kind of superpower, but can also be a hindrance, like you said, is being able to open your eyes and pattern match in terms of like problem solution fit, and recognize things and work out where there's potentially solutions. It means that you can find lots of opportunities. The struggle is then knowing which to potentially pursue at the right times without being too distracted. Because if you try and juggle a million things at once, you're potentially never going to do like one thing really, really well, which I think was a big learning for me. And I guess, like you said, in that case of like students, is when we even hire now, I don't really look at degrees, like what you got, what grades it was. Like, I don't think university, outside of like STEM subjects, like veterinary, medical based degrees, where obviously they're like required to have a career in that field. For the most part, I think university now is much more around like experience. And it's like the lessons you learn of becoming an adult, living by yourself for the first time, getting to like meet your people, like, which I think is a lot of people really struggle with, like getting to learn what it is like to be responsible and do a lot of things on your own. And I think that's kind of what's important. And a lot more students that we're finding in the data are really looking for like the fairy tale uni experience rather than just like the grades.
Mm. You mentioned something a moment ago which I find really interesting. Someone actually asked me this yesterday, so I'm curious to hear your thoughts. How are you able to discern between what is a distraction and what is actually critical?
I wish I could give you like the magic, I guess, like process of like how to do it. I think it's probably one of those lessons that, I don't know, maybe people have figured it out to the absolute perfection, but for me, I think it will always be a learning curve. I think there's things that I've put in place and have learned over time on like ways to like rank and journal ideas and like the use of AI in terms of like critical thinking to really like document things, to look at what is worth pursuing, what is the cost of pursuing it or the risks associated, what should be killed, what is pushed back, and then what is like brought into focus. Because the reality is with a lot of things is like something has to give. And I know I think it's very easy, especially that I know seeing your stuff and us chatting for a while, is like the ADHD entrepreneur, you feel like you can just keep taking more things on. And in some cases, like you can, it's like instead of working 12 hours a day, you work 16 and you've got an extra 4 hours there to then pick up another project. But that potentially gives in terms of sleep, relationships, health. So I always feel like it's looking at that balance of like what is going to give, what's going to sacrifice, and does it make sense to drop things to bring in new opportunities, or what gets killed or pushed back?
Makes sense. I think one of the most helpful frames that I've at least used, because that's something that I've previously struggled with tremendously, is the shiny object syndrome. And, especially when you feel competent and you feel capable, you're like, I could do that. I could do all of that. So it's like, let's go do all of that. It's like, that's not obviously the right use of like your brain and the resources and energy and time that you do have. So I think for me, the way that I've been able to at least have a framework to be able to decide is it's all predicated on me being able to understand from a business context, like what is the constraint in the
Yep,
business at the moment? Because I recognize that if I look back at my previous businesses, there was always one very clear constraint that was present that needed to be solved. Let's say it was leads. We didn't have enough
yep,
leads that were coming through. But then if you looked at my actions and how I was spending my time, I was tinkering with delivery. It was like, that is something that could need to be solved or there'd be utility in putting time and energy into, just not now.
yep,
And that for me is really helpful because as soon as I'm able to know what the constraint is, I then have a criteria and I'm able to essentially hold the thing that I'm potentially going to do up against the constraint and go, does this action take me closer to solving the constraint? And if the answer is no, then I can park it
yep,
and circle back around to it later.
yep.
But that's at least for me how I've been able to recognize whether this is something that's a little bit shiny that's trying to capture my attention or something that's actually really beneficial for me to be working on right now.
No, you're spot on. I think it's a really good framework. Like I really like, I think you've read it as well, like Simon Sinek's Start With Why. And I think as a more global thesis around just business in general, like what's the why? I also think the question why around just like all of the micro events that happen in business and in everyday life is like always kind of asking that question. And like you said, it really helps to discern like what's important versus what's not. Like you said, if the problem is getting more leads in, it's like, well, why is that the case? Because you need to do it for this business to bring in more turnover, etc. So it's like, new shiny object. Like an instance in our case, right? We're just about to launch like a brand new like dashboard for a lot of our university partners, which is got loads of like really valuable data that's really useful for them in their like understanding of the market and their decision making. And knowing it's like ideas, it's like, each page, we could add this. We could put this and make this look better and design this and do that. And it's like, and then you could spend 6 months tweaking small things. Where it's like, if you ask a question like, why would we actually want to do those things? Does making the design look prettier on this page, does that increase revenue? No. Does it increase the value to the consumer? No. Will it help win more business? No. So it's like, well, why would we bother wasting time doing it then? So I think that's like a really good framing to look at, like, yeah, that decision making process.
I remember someone, it must have been one of my first like mentors or something. At this point in time, did not know that I had an ADHD brain, but there were many signs. We'd hop on a call, and I'd be like, "Oh, like I've had this new idea. Like, how about I develop this?" And the question that they would keep reorientating myself towards and helping me to re-anchor was like, "What are we solving for?"
Yeah.
And if you can answer that question, which is obviously linked to the constraint discussion we just had a moment ago, if the answer then is like more sales, it's like cool. Is tinkering with your delivery or creating a nice fancy spreadsheet solving for
Hmm.
more sales? It helps us to create that black and white nature that I think we sometimes do need to not like dampen our creativity, but to park our creativity from being explored in areas that are not ultimately where we should be putting it right now. Like, we want the ability to be creative, but creative problem solving for the problems that need to be solved right now, not problems that don't yet exist.
Yeah.
Cool. So there's a question I want to ask you because, to my understanding, I've not yet had anyone on the podcast that has raised capital, or at least we've not discussed it. So you guys have raised just under 1.2 mil for Rumi so far. Something that I've been keen to ask you is, naturally business comes with lots of pressures and challenges by default. Have you found that by having to raise capital or choosing to raise capital, let's say, and then spending other people's capital has added any interesting layers of complexity or pressure that you didn't expect, or that other people who don't have to do that likely haven't considered?
I think it's something I could probably spend a long time kind of working through the experience, the feelings that are attached to it, and the way that impacts business. So I'll try and be quite clear and direct. I think the main thing, and the truth is, I haven't really known any different. So it's very hard for me to benchmark to how would it be of running a business where it's like self-funded. My understanding would be that I think it's actually supported us in a lot of ways in terms of the build, because it's created where it's in business, right? It's you've got to get up and go. You've got to self-motivate. You've got to keep working at it. I feel like having that level of like external expectation on you need to deliver, you need to hit targets. In a way, you've got people that you need to report to. People have backed, especially in early stage startups. A lot of it is they're backing you as founders, not necessarily the business at the time. Like when we first took on investment, our business today is very different to what we first pitched. Not like hugely, but in terms of our like business model and service offering, it is. And those investors that came in initially have continued to reinvest. And I think that shows why it's so important that, or as why it's helped us really, of raising money has added that extra level of, yeah, I guess motivation. That's like people have backed you. You've got a level of hard work, expectation to uphold. So it keeps you going. Because the reality is, as we all know it, right? Business is hard. Like there are days where, yeah, you just want to kind of put your head under the duvet, or you just want to like just run away and disappear. And I don't believe I would do that, but I have the feeling that if you were in just business by yourself and it's that early stage where it's like failures after failures after failures and it's really hard to get going, it could be very easy to just kind of turn off the light. But I think having a external investors, a board, etc., it kind of like it adds that extra level that keeps you going. Is it's kind of like, no, like get up, get your head down, you know you're gonna figure it out. So don't get me wrong, there are a lot of different pressures, but I think they're same pressures. To an extent, I think it makes it easier. To an extent, I think it makes it harder.
Yeah, it's interesting because we've spoke about this off air before as well. Like, what actually drives motivation, especially in those that have a brain that's similar to ours, right? And how do we overcome some of the natural tendencies that come with this brain type as well, which a lot of people do typically face, which is, the ability to be consistent, the ability to compress time and not leave things to the last minute. And I'd imagine, just as you're talking there, like what came to my mind is that all of this with external capital and people on the board, etc., just adds urgency and it adds stakes. And those two things provide us with dopamine,
Yes.
which is that all important kind of motivational factor for getting our brains to do the shit that we know we want to be doing anyway. So yeah, that's interesting. I can imagine that that actually does have a lot of utility to play, because I know I
Hmm.
speak to a lot of solopreneurs as well, and they don't have anybody to monitor their performance or
Hmm.
to hold them accountable. They often don't manufacture a sense of urgency or stakes in their own life or in their
Hmm.
own business. And then what could take someone 6 months ends up taking them 3 years because that's not present. And I think we know have known each other for a long time, and for the listeners that don't know, we've worked together quite a lot as well, right?
Yep.
And one thing that I'm always impressed by with yourself and with obviously your team is how quickly you're able to move and the intensity that you're able to work at. And I think that naturally comes down to a myriad of different factors, but I would assume that's probably one of them.
Yeah, I think you're right. I love the pressure, and I think that probably is like we said. Is it's the and I'll probably get onto some of the brain stuff around ADHD, etc. But it's that the dopamine you get from the pressure is it kind of makes you feel alive. It's that it's that kind of whole pressure is a privilege, right? And unknowingly, like growing up at school, etc., is I've always kind of thrived under that environment. And yeah, I think it's probably always a little bit strange. And to this day, it probably sounds a bit strange. But I used to love like exams, like morning of exam, like I was buzzing.
That is strange.
Um, because it was like a real challenge. It was like you've got in front of you, it's like a test of what you're capable of. And I think when you don't have that like pressure, I feel like it's very easy to kind of just slack. Like with our investors, right? Good example, we do a monthly update, which is kind of how the business has gone this month, how we've done overall relative to our expectations last month, to talk about where we've succeeded, where things haven't necessarily gone to plan, what we're doing to mitigate risks, all of those things. But it keeps you wanting to be like, we need to push hard and fast, which I think you do anyway, as like in business. But I think it's easier to keep moving at such a pace when you have like, yeah, there's a monthly update that's going out at the end of the month. If we don't achieve anything, like that's like a bad look. And I feel like when you don't have that like external pressure and need to execute, it could be easy to be like, oh, this month I can just kind of take my foot off the gas. And then like we can pick things up next month. And then very quickly you're like 4 months down the line as a solopreneur and nothing's really moved. And then you kind of need to build up the systems again personally to keep like get going again.
Have you noticed anywhere in your life in general, it can be outside of the business context, where you don't have that level of pressure and you can see a clear difference between how you act with maybe external pressure versus just internal pressure?
It's a really good question. It's something that I have and still continue to struggle with is like the value matrix of like things that are important to you in your life. And so like for it's pretty common, right? It's like relationships with your partner. Like I'm getting married later this year. Like there are times when I know that I probably don't give Tash the time that I would love to give her because there's no like, kind of like pressure on it. It's not like Tash is like, oh well, if you don't spend X amount of time with me, like the relationship's going to come to an end. She's incredibly supportful of like business. Like we've been together nearly 10 years now, and like there's not that element of pressure there. So I know sometimes I'm like, oh, like it's been like 2.5, 3 weeks. Like I haven't bought Tash flowers. We've not gone on a date. I haven't spent that much time with her, and I know that's like puts a weight on the relationship or with friends. It's like 6 months has gone by and it's like, oh, friends are really important. There's no pressure there with friends, really. It's like, I've not spent any time. I haven't had many phone calls. We haven't gone for a drink or for food. We haven't caught up. And then you feel like guilty. And again, it's like, I guess to answer your question, where the pressure isn't necessarily there, it's very easy to let the ball drop because you kind of just forget.
Mm. Do you think that in those scenarios with Tash, with your mates, etc., that there would be any utility in having pressure there? And what would that look like? If you were to take the same principles that we've got from business and the pressure that we've got from shareholders, etc., is there anything that you could see you could apply to the personal life that would have a similar type of response?
I think it's hard to try and force pressure that I don't think, or like you could artificially create pressure, right? But I think artificial pressure is very different to real pressure because I think deep down you'd know that it's not real. If you start convincing yourself that if I don't have catch up with friends this often, it's likely I'll lose those friends. If deep down you know that that probably won't happen, it doesn't have the same like mental impact to force you into doing things and kind of get you going. So I would say it's hard to like create the pressure. I think there are things and frameworks that I've worked on, which I know with you, with my therapist, around there are important things in my life that I want to like spend time on because I enjoy it. It's important to me. And I know with like the hyperfixation elements, when you're on business, it's like you can just get so lost in it, like 7 days a week and be like, yeah, wow, 6 months has gone by and all my other values haven't really had any time. The buckets have got empty. That's not the life I want to lead. So it's like, how can you pad into the week like little things like a date night once a week, a night where the laptop gets turned off at 5 o'clock, like going to see like Nan every Thursday, like health and fitness, like these sorts of things that you like block into the calendar where it's like, yeah, I go to gym at these times on these days. There is no, I say no, obviously there can be like emergencies, but there's no meeting that will just like push that out as like, yeah, I guess a long winded way of kind of flurrying around that question.
That makes total sense. And I would say that in just my experience as well, the way that I've been able to combat the similar challenges that you're mentioning there of not having any stakes or pressure in my personal life, which means that I don't speak to the missus or see the missus as much as I should. I don't see my friends barely ever. Um, choosing work because that has more obvious stakes than not going to the gym, at least immediately, is that ultimately if it's not in my diary, it doesn't get done.
Yeah.
That's something that I just like repeat to myself frequently. So going back to that value matrix that you were speaking about earlier, like for me, get clear on like what are the values that I want to live my life by, and then I need to be able to see those represented in my calendar. So if I say that I have a value of family, friends, my partner, and you were to look at my calendar, would you be able to see that that's the case? That's how I kind of audit myself on that.
Mhm.
And it can be spread over like a month or a quarter. It doesn't have to be a week. But that's really for me something that I've been thinking about a lot more recently. Is like I am less concerned about intention anymore and I'm more concerned about action because I can say that I have the intent of having these values, caring for my partner, spending time with my friends. But if I don't do those things and I'm not taking those actions, I they're not in my diary, then intentions don't matter.
Yeah.
So that's kind of just like again, a very black and white way that I'm almost self-auditing for that, is that figuring out what's an appropriate cadence for date nights, it goes in the diary.
Yeah.
What's an appropriate cadence for seeing my friends, it goes in the diary, like once a quarter.
Yeah.
And then when I see a friend, before we leave, like book a meeting from a meeting, we do that. It's like we have to book the next
It's like operationalizing.
100%, bro. I have to, like, why do we have systems in business? Right? Because if we kept everything in our head, it would just be fucking carnage. So it's like, why do we not treat our life in a similar way that we treat our business? So that's the approach that I take. I operationalize my life, I operationalize my relationship, and I treat those more like a business rather than it being like transactional, just the way that I approach it from a systems based thinking. And that sounds like it takes all the spontaneity and the sexiness out of life, but it doesn't. It reduces such a high amount of cognitive load for me that I know that every other Wednesday me and Chloe are going out for a date. And I don't need to sit there thinking, fuck, we've not gone out for a while and I've not bought her flowers for a while. And the only time I figure out that I've not done that is when she's in a half with me.
Mhm. Yeah, like it works. And I think it's something that I think is just useful to explain as well. It's something that you helped me kind of discern as I was, yeah, really struggling to get my head around it, around like the value matrix. Do you remember when we had that session where I was talking about, for like, imagine you're sat in the middle of a room and there's doors all around the outside, and each door is a value of like what's important to you. So it could be business, work, could be like learnings and experiences, it could be relationships with your partner, family and friends, health and fitness. And I remember explaining to you, so I would like to have each door slightly adjourned so it's kind of flowing in. So every week you're kind of getting to have time spent at each one of these values. Whereas I think for like the ADHD brain type, this was actually before I got diagnosed, is it's like you go to one door and be like, all right, I'm going to spend some time at the work door. And you open it and you go, oh yeah, you start getting fixated. And then it's like, bang, door flies open and you're just like all in on that door. And then it's like, oh, like it's important that I spend some time with like my partner. So you kind of try to go over and spend some time at that door, but you can't really close this one. So you've got that door slightly open, but then you're like looking back over your shoulder. So it's then really hard to be present, which then isn't actually fulfilling like that value. And I think you gave me the advice of like, it's around how can we put in tools to allow you to close the doors and then open another one versus feeling like you need to be in a place where you could have multiple doors open at once and not feel like you're not being present at any one of them, which I think was quite eye opening. So I remember doing it, I was just beating myself up. I was like, I hate that we go out for dinner and I'm still thinking about like work and I'm not really engaging in conversation and like stuff like that. I know that's not nice. And I was like, I wish I could just do it all.
Yeah, I feel you, man. I feel you. And I think I was talking to a client of mine about this last week. Why do we as ADHDers become obsessed by business, hyper fixated on business, and almost as a result, a lot of the other areas of our life suffer? I believe it's because we get a tremendous amount of dopamine from business. It is dynamic all of the time. There is always a problem to be solved. It moves so fast. Like everything is fast paced. There are possibilities for wins everywhere, And that is the breeding grounds for a brain like this. Like, that is where we are best suited, is to be in such a fast-paced, high intensity, high stakes, creative, problem-solving, non-linear thinking arena. Like, that is the perfect arena for a
Mhm.
brain type like this. So then if we frame it like that's heroin for our brain,
Yeah.
so then, like, trying to come off of heroin, we're having these withdrawal symptoms. We're sat having a date with the missus and we're like, "Oh, could really do with a fix right now."
Mm.
That's how I've almost been thinking about business. And again, I don't have any judgment on that. I don't think it needs to be a good thing or a bad thing. I think just having the awareness that that's how our brains are probably interacting with business, and that's why we're
Yeah.
probably so drawn to it so frequently, alongside all the other challenges that anybody would experience with business being all consuming. This is something I've been mulling over, is that it feels like chasing the dragon a lot. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I think you're spot on. I mean, I saw an interesting stat recently, so don't quote me. It might be slightly wrong, but it was something along the lines of it's expected that 1 in 4 entrepreneurs have ADHD. I think it was like 1 in every 4, or like 25%. And then the next kind of part of the stats, I can't remember exactly what it was, but there was like a huge percentage difference in the number of ADHD entrepreneurs that start businesses, and then the huge percentage of failed businesses that are ADHD entrepreneurs. So someone with ADHD is way more likely to start, but also way more likely to fail.
I had a podcast episode with a guy called John Torrance from New York, runs, I think it's like 3 businesses, did a TED talk on ADHD being a superpower. That's how I found him. And he actually, after removing himself from the business, had lots of spare time and went and did some like philanthropy and some studies around this. And I believe he actually said that obviously we've got talk about it in the, I guess, the known way, which is like inattentive ADHD and hyperactive
Yep.
ADHD. He said that from the studies, hyperactive ADHDers make significantly better business owners, and the inattentive ADHDers do not. And I found that really interesting because there's a certain tendency that they lean towards. And he basically said that those who have a hyperactive variation of ADHD, let's say, if we bucket them in that way, they have a higher amount of agility to be able to like pivot quickly. They typically have a higher level of resilience. They bounce back from failures like incredibly quickly and almost like forget about them. They're able to move fast. And I'm sure there are tons of natural challenges that come with that as well, with like moving too fast and giving your
Mhm.
team whiplash and, maybe creating a new product when you already have one that you haven't finished yet, all of these things. But he said data is very clear that the inattentive
Yeah.
ADHD cannot get started and they cannot move quick enough to actually make it in business.
Yeah.
And I find that really interesting. Now, we've skirted around the topic and we have flirted with it slightly. So, you've recently been diagnosed with both ADHD and autism. I'm just curious how you're finding navigating that.
It's been really interesting because I feel like it's never really been known growing up. Like, it wasn't really said by teachers, by parents, friends, etc. that, oh, like, you might have ADHD, you might have autism. It was kind of just like normal for me. However, is where I go to therapy, because I feel like it's really important for a lot of people to like have a area in your life where you can really discuss about kind of the problems you're facing, how you're feeling, and to work through some of these things. Is it was actually my therapist that suggested to me that he's not qualified to diagnose me with either, but he suggested that a lot of the ways that he's noticed my brain works, that he's had clients in the past that have ADHD and autism, or either or, and that to what I thought was like normal in terms of the way I think, is a lot of people actually don't operate that way. And the way when I went through the assessment of, they diagnosed both together, so it was through the like NHS right to choose, which was actually really great and really efficient. Like, the whole process was pretty much less than 2 months after getting referred to the GP by the therapist, which, yeah, I was quite surprised in, because a lot of people have said, oh, if you're going to do it, you should go private because it takes too long. But they do it together separately. So ADHD happened first, the diagnosis, and then it was like the autism side was 2 stages. The interesting part was the way they explained it to me is there were parts of ADHD that would mask parts of autism. And then the parts of autism would mask the parts of ADHD. So they said internally, my brain operates very differently, but externally, it's seen as like pretty normal. So like whereas I always seem like pretty kind of focused to an extent, like pretty clear with my thinking, like I'm not necessarily like inept with like social situations. It's like those kind of, I guess, more like autistic traits or the balance between the two have kind of overlapped each other. So like a lot of things that I thought normal, like you mentioned around pattern matching, is I kind of grew up like just working stuff out. Is like always taking a notice of like eye contact, like face expressions to kind of learn what part you should play in a social situation to kind of fit the room. I thought that was just like a normal thing. Turns out kind of going through the whole process that actually most people don't do that. It's kind of just natural. So whereas, yeah, it's been interesting. I haven't struggled with like the diagnosis, I guess, to actually come back to your question. It's been quite eye-opening because I've done loads of research off the back of it, which has really helped me to understand. There are parts of it I really don't like in terms of my research, and it's actually upset me quite a lot that it feels there's quite a victim mentality to an extent, like post-diagnosis is, yeah, like some like really good books I've read around understanding, but it's this kind of like the system's built against us, and I've never liked the idea of like playing a victim. And I get it, like when people say like, oh, like, well, you get extra exam time if you've got ADHD or autism, or you get to work from home more in a corporate environment if you get diagnosed with ADHD. And it's like, I get it because like there are cases where it is kind of used as like an excuse. It's used as like victim mentality, which has like created this environment where I feel like there are probably a lot of people that would feel like uncomfortable. I'm very open, like with like investors and stuff like this. If we talk about like neurodivergence, like I'll quite happily say it now. Whereas I know that there is also this mentality of like, oh, I shouldn't say, they might think of me in a certain light. I mean, it was when we were getting a coffee this morning when we were just chatting about it, and the guy was listening in and said, "Oh, yeah, well, people say I don't know why I hired them. Like they've got ADHD." Like I feel like there's a negative connotation to it, which I think is actually really sad. But it's been, yeah, I wouldn't say it's challenging to have got the diagnosis. I think it's been eye opening. I think I've struggled really. I think I messaged you after I got both to kind of talk about it because I was like, I don't really know how I feel, which I feel like is part of them is like figuring out like my whole life's like, how should you feel? You get a big win, you should feel happy. Stuff goes bad, oh, you should probably feel sad. So I kind of created the emotion off the back of things. Whereas with like the diagnosis, it's like, should I feel sad? Should I feel like happy? I now like really understand the way my brain works. Like I just felt a bit more confused than anything.
Has anything changed for you off the back of getting a diagnosis?
I wouldn't necessarily say anything's like changed. Like I've always believed that it changes nothing. Like I'm still as anyone, you're still the exact same person as long as you don't then turn it into like an excuse. Like that was so important for me that so whether I got diagnosed or not when I went through the process is I never want it to be like, oh, this means that it can excuse certain behaviors. So like forgetting an appointment because it wasn't in your calendar. Oh well, like that's fine because I've got ADHD, or like forgetting to do certain things or not spending time with your partner or friends and stuff. So, oh, well, it like I've never wanted it to excuse bad behavior or like what I believe is like bad behavior. So it doesn't change who you are. I think I'm glad for me, it will never be used as an excuse. That was the whole idea is like this diagnosis is to help understand, not to excuse. It's opened my eyes, like I said, up to a lot of things to really understand the way my brain works, of like understanding like feelings, emotions, like when I feel really drained and I'm kind of asking myself questions of like, oh, we had a really good board meeting today, really productive, or like whatever it may be, and coming off the back of it and feeling just incredibly mentally drained and like really struggling to be present, being like, oh, no one else looks like they're kind of like mentally this drained, and being able to understand like where there's areas of like the autism side of like the amount of like pattern matching that's happening at once is like taking up so much mental energy, and explaining that it's like really helped. So I guess to answer your question, nothing's changed. It's just really helped, I think, under like with my own understanding.
What would you say has been 1 to 2 biggest insights that you've learnt about yourself and the way your brain works, either going through this diagnosis process, or over the past couple of years that you've at least been curious about it?
So what are the biggest like kind of lessons or
Hmm.
strengths from it?
Yeah, less so strengths, more so something that you didn't know that you now do, and that has created an insightful moment for you to be like, "That makes sense." Maybe it's through learning something, gaining a new piece of information, you're able to look back and connect the dots and maybe previous challenges or
Okay.
experience.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think the one singular one for me would be the pattern matching side, which has caused probably an incredible amount of like stress and anxiety that I now understand. So it's everything for like this brain type, I guess, is so understand like why. Like it's always asking that curious question, why? It's like, why do they seem sad? Reading facial expressions, is it something going on with work? Could it be something outside of work? And it's that over analyzing every situation to understand people, to understand things, to understand business. And I've always really struggled with if I can't decipher via like a series of like, just like, I guess, yeah, pattern matching and questions, that I get incredibly anxious and uncomfortable. So I'm happy to be transparent. I suffer a lot from health anxiety. And one of the reasons for that is, which again is probably leading back to why I found a lot of interest in medicine, is it's always that why thinking. It's like, why does the body work in this way? Oh, that's really interesting. So for me personally, where I don't have necessarily the like knowledge and understanding to decipher like, oh, like why have you got stomach ache? Or like why why have you got a headache? My mind immediately goes into like microanalyzing everything. So it's like headache. Have you had enough water? Yeah, that's done. Did you drink alcohol yesterday? No, that wasn't happened. Like all these things like, oh, could it be like a brain bleed, a hemorrhage? Could it be a migraine? Like, why? And becoming unstuck to like finish kind of that loop would just cause so much anxiety. Whereas I think it's really helped kind of really understanding there are so many benefits to like the speed of thinking to understand why, to in a way like masking situations to be better on sales call. Understand like, why would this person want to buy your product? The stuff that you don't realize, but on the other hand, which that stuff's great. On the other hand, it creates this level of anxiety and stress if you can't connect. That I'm now like, oh, I understand that my brain is working like this. So I can kind of now appreciate and going like, yeah, cool. It's trying to figure this out. There isn't actually necessarily an answer. Getting more comfortable, feeling like I can't connect and finish that loop, and being like quite happy to sit in it.
Mm. You've got a lot of people that are invested in your success, a lot of help, we can call it, from all different angles, from the therapist that you see to the board to lots of other kind of people in your support network. Is there any piece of advice that has really stuck with you over the past 12 to 24 months that you share with the listeners? And this can be business or not.
In business, it would be focus on one thing and do it really, really well. And I'm going to contradict myself slightly. It doesn't mean to kind of ignore everything else, i.e., it's important when you grow a team to like lead and manage properly. It's important to do like your marketing function well, your sales function well. But I think to really have like one thing or like an overall kind of mission or goal that you're looking to achieve and focused on like, I guess, everything aligning towards doing that one thing really well, it just allows you to operate at speed and like move really, really quickly. I feel like you said, for especially the ADHD mind, when it's new idea, new opportunity, the shiny object syndrome, is like you can very quickly decipher away from that. And before you know it, you're doing six things, maybe okay, maybe badly. Whereas in the reality is if you were really focused on kind of one goal, you could be doing that really, really well. And then in a way, earn the right to do the next thing and then earn the right to do the next thing. Yeah, I think that would probably probably be one of my biggest learnings that I've had across like mentors, advisors, etc.
Yeah, I love it. The way I frame this and think about this myself is that an ADHD brain is like an F1 car. And if we think about an F1 car racing, when is it at its top speed? It's like when it's on the straight and narrow.
Hmm.
If we're constantly creating these corners and these loops that we need to go on with these new ideas and these distractions, then we're only slowing down the rate of which that we can get from where we are right now to the finish line. And it's why I call it like a straight line focus, which is to what you're
Yeah.
saying there
Yeah.
is like the biggest hack for an ADHD brain and an ADHD entrepreneur is to subtract everything else from your life that isn't the one thing that you need to be focusing on. So you can create a straight line between you and that thing. And if we use that analogy of an F1 brain, that is when you're going to get the highest level of speed and get there with the quickest velocity.
hmm No, you're spot on. But it's all a challenge, right? Because I guess then, like we said earlier, is when you're trying to balance values in your life, it's to do that, it requires sacrifice. So that might mean not spending time with friends, might mean not spending time with your partner. Because, like you said, in the F1 car, every time you slow down and come around a curve, you need to take time to speed back up again. So it's all a, it's all a balancing act, right? Like it's just a game of figuring it out.
Certainly is, mate. It certainly is. Now, if people have enjoyed this conversation today and they want to stay tuned with what you're doing and what you're doing at Rumi, where can they find out more about you?
So it's Owen Redman on LinkedIn. We also have a Roomy LinkedIn page, Instagram, TikTok, and website. It's ROOME. For the website, it's ROOME/UNI.com.
Dude, appreciate you being here today.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you for tuning in, team. Make sure you check out next week's episode, and I'll see you then.